the reason why environmental problems cannot be solved is because people don't know who they are. And if they don't know who they are, they're not open to listening to other people. And so if you're not open to listening to other people, how are we going to come together and solve problems? So I just kept the vision true to me. So I was like, okay, between me and my vision, what's the gap? Who do I need to know? What do I need to learn? And what do I need to do? So that's why, like, the whole creating for me, creating your limitless life is like, what is that vision? What is that legacy? And what does your dream day look like?
Hello, everyone. This is Pam, the Café con Pam, the bilingual podcast that features Latina and people of the global majority who break barriers, change lives, and make the world a better place. Welcome to episode 383 of Café con Pam. Today, we have a conversation with Dr. Esther Zeledon, affectionately known as Dr. Ez, is a trailblazer who embodies the resilience of a Latina immigrant with a unique superpower to unlock the potential in individuals, teams, and organizations. Her journey spans a broad spectrum of roles, including entrepreneur, speaker, coach, award winning diplomat, and international development professional, activist, mother, mentor, extreme couponer, travel guru, dance queen, scientist, and author. Through her latest book and #1 workbook, Creating Your Limitless Life on Your Terms, she guides others towards a life of authentic fulfillment and joy. Dr. Esther leverages her diverse experiences to bridge cultural and community gaps, dedicating her efforts to fostering transformational change and building collective power, founded on purpose, kindness, joy, peace, health, love, and prosperity. Dr. Esther is a guiding light for those seeking to uncover and live their limitless life and make a lasting and difference in the world. Bueno, this conversation with Dr. Esther fue buenísima. We really dove deep into her life and how every part of her lived experience informed her next chapter and how she was able to, through all of the various parts of herself in her life, she was able to build now the life that she lives. I think this is an episode you're going to leave with super inspired. Y bueno, sin más, here's my conversation with Dr. Esther Zeledon. Dr. Esther, welcome to Café con Pam. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I am well. Thank you for coming. I love your background. It's so colorful.
Thank you. Actually, a local artist painted it. She's amazing.
How fun.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool. It
Yeah.
kind of like it matches your workbook
Yep.
in a
Yep.
way.
And actually, it's a whole sun. It's just a lot bigger. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's very
Yeah.
cool. Very, very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So the question we always ask is what is your heritage?
Yeah. So I was born in Nicaragua, and I have both my parents are Nicaraguan. And yeah, so born there, but then we immigrated to the United States, and I was when I was young, and then I have lived overseas now for a long time, like on and off. So even though I would say I'm Nicaraguense, I feel so much more of like a global.
Of the world.
Yeah, and then my husband's Mexican, Salvadoreño, like his mom is from the Yucatan, his dad's from
Wow.
El Salvador. Yeah, and so we have the whole Central America mix in
Yeah, big time.
in Mexico. Yeah, and so we kind of grew up, we eat all the different foods, but then a big part of our
Mm,
global travels, we also have incorporated different things from all over. Um, yeah, yeah,
I
so
love
definitely
that.
Latina, but with a twisted mix of the world.
I love that.
Yeah, yeah.
So, when you say you moved, how old were you when you moved to the US?
It's well, I have a crazy story.
Okay. We got time.
Yeah, because when I was 2 years old, I was given 3 weeks to live. I had a
Oh,
urethra problem. Yeah. And I had turned completely yellow. And my dad went to Honduras and Costa Rica, and my whole family to see how they could save my life. And then my dad's like, it's funny because he doesn't see himself as like a spiritual man. He doesn't,
uh-huh,
but he is. He's a
uh-huh.
manifester. So like he had manifested before when he was younger. and manifested what he wanted and got it. But in that moment, he was like, he's like, he told my mom, I want to play the lotto, and I think we could win and save her life. My mom's like, are you serious? This is what you're thinking about right now? Tu estás loco?
Right.
Even though she had seen him win before money, but she was like, tu estás loco? That's not a priority right now. Money. But he was like, I'm doing it. And so the story goes, I helped him choose the numbers, but I was like two, right? And then
Wow.
it's all him. But they won the money to save my life. So it's kind of hard to say because with that money, I was able to go with my mom for 6 months in Miami and get
Oh
the
my
treatment I needed. But you know
gosh.
how that is, right? If you're international and you're not, citizen of the United States, all that,
Yeah.
right? Healthcare is ridiculous. So all the money went to that. And so it's hard to say because at 2 years old, I spent 6 months in the US, right? And
Wow.
then we went back. And then, of course, that's when like the Civil War started happening. And so then, eventually, we had to then fully immigrate with just the suitcases. So yeah, so my first experience in the US was at two.
That's
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening with the treatment? What kind of treatment did you get that saved your life?
Yeah, I got a surgery because my urethra was too small.
Okay.
Yeah. So I got a whole surgery. I don't know the details medically of it, but yeah, but it was like a whole process. Yep. And I think also I had been on so many antibiotics and things, right? So I needed like it was a process. Yeah. I do
Totally.
know that it was like 6 months but then that was it. Isn't that it is crazy.
That is wild.
And it was the exact money they needed. But then
Oh my gosh.
I know. I know. But then I carried that with me though, right? Because the indirect effects of that is I felt guilty. I felt like they could have
Ooh.
had that money to not have struggled in the US, right?
Wow.
Because then when they immigrated with just their suitcases, right? They're too educated, but they had to work, service jobs. And I felt that guilt that had I not been sick or had I not been a burden, right? They wouldn't have had to struggle. So it's how we interpret, right, these events in our life
Yes.
and how we internalize them. And that's what I did. And so then I became the high achiever, which is the people pleaser, overthinker, perfectionist, because I was like, I will not be a burden again. And also, they were always like worried about me and I was the fragile one, whatever. And so the narrative was, the basic things like we're gonna get you, you're gonna go to school but get married, and that's the extent of the dreaming for me.
Wow.
Well, like my sister definitely was encouraged to, become a women leader and all that. And I think she had at that time, it was she had a different narrative, right? And a different whole other situation role in the thing. So we grew up with different narratives.
Which one? What number are you?
I am three. She's older.
Okay.
I'm three. So I have an older brother too. She's the oldest girl.
Okay. So you're the youngest.
Not the youngest, because there's another boy under.
There's another one? Okay, okay, okay.
Yeah, and we're so spread out that, like, it was weird because at some point I became then the oldest and then took care of my brother, right? So it's like even at different phases,
Yeah.
I played the oldest child and parentified child later.
Mhm.
But when I was
Mhm.
younger, she was the parentified older child, right? That had a sixth sibling, right? So it's like it's funny because we talk about it now, but we both played then similar roles of being like the parent and the caretaker. And now both of us are the ones who majority take on that responsibility in general. And so it's interesting, but I mean how we interpreted all that and those events were different and how that affected us in our lives. And so but still in the similarity though is that we both, when we both became these
High achieving, successful.
high achievers to an extent. Yeah,
Yeah.
to basically heal the financial stability part, right? And just make sure that we could bring that and heal the pain of having to suffer financially.
Yeah.
But then realized by doing that, like I was in complete misalignment, right?
Totally.
Like I
Totally.
didn't even know who I was, right? I was just because I hadn't done that balance. I was just after the metrics and trying to I don't know, fix it in a way, right? Like I was like, okay,
Yeah.
give back to it and like give back that burden that I had placed. Yeah. So
Ooh,
that's a little bit of that story. Yeah.
that's deep. And I love that you mentioned the perspective that we create based on circumstances because I'm sure if we were to ask your sister, like, do you remember when Esther at the time, when she was sick, she'd be like a whole other story, you
Right.
know?
Because for her mom, right? Our mom left for 6 months with me, right? There's
Correct.
a whole other wound from that. And
Yes.
and also, yeah, so there's a lot there, right? And it's all about how we lived it, our lived experience through it. Hmm.
So, and how about the brothers? Were they just as affected, or was it the daughters? Because typically, it's the eldest daughter and the
Yeah.
youngest that becomes the oldest. Have you heard of that term? The youngest, oldest daughter?
Oh, I can see that. No, I never heard that term, but like, no, my brother was not like neither. Well, my younger brother wasn't born yet, right? But no, he almost like he read my book and he was like, "Oh, I remember mom and dad winning the lottery." It's a total different, for while my sister, it was so close, right? She was like, "Oh my
Totally.
god, I relived our whole childhood by reading it." But to my brother, he but it was different.
Oh
He was
my
older,
god.
older. Yeah, so we were all spread out. So it was a lot more of it's more of my sister and I's like real narrative and lived experience.
Oh
Hmm.
my gosh.
Yeah. And of course my parents, right?
Totally. So we had a different call a while ago, and I told you about the Calladita Culture principles.
Yeah.
I turned them into wounds, actually. So there's been a I don't know, an evolution since we last talked, which was a minute ago. And now we have the 5 wounds of Kaita culture. And as you're telling me the
Ooh.
story, we have the wound of silence, the wound of power, the wound of identity, the wound of commitment, and the wound of worth. And those are, you could over or undercompensate them. And so in your case, I think it's the wound of power that, in a
Hmm.
way, like you don't have power to help the parents. And so when you
Yeah.
grew up to like make shit happen, you were like, let's go. We're going to check all the boxes. We're going to like
Yeah.
on paper be all successful. How was it for you to find out that that wasn't the whole thing? What did you realize you were not in full alignment?
Yeah. Oh. And the thing is like that little voice inside of us is always kind of telling us, right? But it's about, I was such a, when you think about the high achiever spectrum, there's people who have more of one than the other. All right, you can be more of a people pleaser, more of a overthinker, more of a perfectionist, right? And those percentages are different for every person. But for me, I lean more on the people pleasing, way more heavily than the other two. Even though I have a lot of the other two, the people pleasing with people is like my
Yes.
kryptonite, and still something that I manage today. But I think that that's what was the hard part. So right, so I wanted to make everyone happy and fix everyone and take everyone's pain away, and I think that, and not be a burden. That was like a major story in my life, was not being a burden.
Mhm.
So like, so I mean, it's kind of hard to say, right? Like, I mean, I know exactly when I pinpoint it, but the thing is, it happened many times in my life, right? So like, even like a 16, it's funny because I learned that narrative later. So 16, I had not funny in a sense of like when I look back. At that time
Right,
it was
right,
not
right.
funny. I actually like attempted. I took an attempt on my own life,
Oh my
but
gosh.
because everyone thought it was because I was going through a breakup. Now the breakup was the cause of sadness. Clearly, right? Sadness, and I was like my first thing, but it was a lot of other things. It was a lot of that check mark thing that I was like, first boyfriend, I'm going to marry him, right? All the check mark that I needed to accomplish.
Mm.
So it was like, oh no, now I'm derailed. One. And then the second thing was I was sad and all of a sudden I'm a burden again, right? Everyone's worried about me. Everyone's like what's going on? And because I'm
Oof.
not everything I feel is all is on my face, right? So I can't hide it.
Yes.
So that was an accumulation that I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle the pain and being a burden. And and so for me, that's when I realized the first part, that I was like, I was doing the metrics in such a way that was almost so rigid. Okay, then
Mhm.
was later, right, when I'm doing my the following the career, right? And of course, the immigrant family was like, "Oh, you got into like one of the top schools in the United States. You need to be a doctor."
Right.
And at first, I go along with it, but I'm like, "Oh, I have a vomit phobia. I can't be in a hospital, but I do love science." So I tried to find a way that I was like, I'm going to do all the pre-med prerequisites, but do something like I'm passionate about. And at that time, the closest thing I could find was I was really fascinated with climate change affecting our communities. And really, like, a justice was a constant theme in my life, right? And I was
Yes.
like, I need to help, like, that the underserved and underrepresented communities all around the world are not impacted by it. So I kind of went on that thing of like, I'm going to become a climate change scientist. But at that time, like, my school didn't have that major. So I was already bringing out part of me where I was like
Uh-huh.
the trailblazer, the innovator. I'm going to come up with this major. But, I still had that push from my family. Like, you're going to be broke. Like,
Right.
that's ridiculous. What are you doing? Environment is for white people. It's for people who have
Mm.
money, not.
Right.
There's a lot of these narratives. And I was like, actually, but it's going to affect us the most. I disagree with you. But it was the first time finding my voice. So I'm saying, like, it starts,
Mhm.
but at the same time, it wasn't my full alignment. It was just my way of, within the structure, how can I have a little bit of me?
Yes.
And then I got my PhD, but then again, my the best thing about my PhD was helping my dad get his. So my dad didn't finish his PhD, and he always talked about his regret and his purpose in life. And that's what happens to a lot, like, of immigrant families. Their purposes get passed on to us, and their
Yes.
legacies, right? And
Yes.
so I felt it's not like anyone told me, but I felt the burden and
Correct.
obligation to do it for him and to heal him from it, to fix it. And so
Wow.
I helped him finish it. I helped him finish it, but at the same time, I realized that I hadn't taken any joy or anything in mind. Like, I learned a lot. That's where I learned the power of, like, listening. I did my dissertation in Nicaragua with the indigenous communities, and I was like, okay, this is I narratives and stories are important, and I was trying to link it to science. But then I went, I couldn't, recession. I ended up finding a job in Ecuador as a professor, and it was a great time. But then when I started a career in diplomacy and humanitarian assistance.
How did that switch happen?
Well, I always wanted to do that because the stuff with, like, the climate change stuff is linked, but I didn't want to
Yeah.
be like the person where all the research just stays with academics. Again, it's about justice,
Mhm.
and for me, access is really important, right? And so the fact that I felt like my
And
research,
academia is very elitist.
yes, and I that's not it's not aligned with me. And so I and plus what I was doing, it's always the case. As a trailblazer, you're not doing things that are already institutionalized. So the
Yes.
fact that I was bringing, like, science with stories, and you can't quantify stories yet. It was a hard, it was a different, it was innovative research, right? And so it was great. I had my own funding, so I could do it. But there wasn't, like, a space for me in that academic track to keep bringing that. And plus I was like, well, then it's only centered. You can work with students, but the research part wasn't as appealing to me. And I was like, I'd rather make change. And my whole thing was, I want to bring climate change solutions to
Mhm.
communities. So as I started to think about it, I'm like, I got to go into government. So, and in government, you have to pay. You can't go straight from your PhD. I needed experience, so that's why I first went to work in Ecuador on something totally different. It was like energy related and things. But I learned a lot from my students because they were all master's students. They had all worked, and so I got to learn about the realities of, like, implementing a lot of these solutions and bringing people together. And so when I went into government, I first started as, like, a scientific advisor to government, and then I decided I want to go work in countries and, like, do this on the ground.
Hang on, you're going fast. You're going fast. I have questions. So
Yeah. I'm trying to, like, speed to where my misalignment was.
I
But
know.
yeah,
There's so many layers there that we can peel
so
because
many.
so many layers. So you're a woman in science
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
different country. like, you got your own funding. Was that hard? Did you get any pushback? Were you, like, also
Oh,
that innovative research, was it challenged where you had to kinda, like, in a way, defend it?
oh yeah. No, absolutely. No, it was very hard, but I knew, but you see, I knew it was going to be controversial. And I
Mm,
knew that it was going to be hard sell. So I knew that I had to come in and find my own money. I knew this in college. I was like, so I spent my summers doing, I was like, I need to figure out, like, it's like navigating the systems, right? Like that's the one
yeah.
thing, like, even though, you know how we think about first gen. Like I love that the definition now includes immigrants as well, because
Mhm.
I was still navigating a system I knew nothing about, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I want to get into a PhD program. I need to do research every summer so that I can compete, right? And be at the same scale. And so I went to do research in Costa Rica. I did research in the labs. I did research at NASA. I did research in a university and getting experience, right? And professors and things like that. So, I mean, in college, I always talk about that. College was, there's flow and hustle,
Yeah.
and college was definitely my hustle. Like it was the time where I didn't drink till graduate school, which is,
Oh.
I just studied and worked my booty off. And plus when I got there my first year I almost failed, because even though I was top of my class in high school, you're at these elite colleges, people have been boarding school and tutors and,
Did you feel imposter there?
oh, of course, right? I mean, I was top of in a public high school, the largest public high school in Miami.
Yeah.
But going into Swarthmore College in Philly, I was like back to the lowest person on the totem pole, right? I was hitting there, I would be in like chem lab and they're like, I spent chemistry camp with this famous person. I'm like, oh,
Right.
I spent my summer working at the supermarket to pay for my textbooks, right?
Totally. How did you overcome that?
Well, the thing is, I was almost failing my first year. And it was my first experience with a coach.
In college?
Yeah, I asked for
I
help.
love this so much.
Yeah, I asked for help. I went to the center and I'm like, I cannot fail. Cause one, I was like, I cannot go home and I don't want to go home. I was like, we moved from California to Miami when I was like 10, and Miami was a lot of struggle. And there's a beautiful part of Miami and then there's the struggle part of Miami. I was in the struggle part. And I felt that I wanted to get out of there. I had dreams of seeing the world. I had dreams of building this financial stability. And I was like, I will not, like, my sister had paved the way because she had gone to college. So when I went to visit her, I had one visit, but that was it. I needed, it's knowing the possibilities. Like when I had the whole time, one
Mhm.
visit with her changed my life. I was like, this is where I want to go away and have the same type of experience. So when I got there and I started to fail, I was like, I cannot fail. I cannot go home. So I went to like the career center and I told them, hey, like I'm struggling, like what can I do? I can take out a loan or something to, and I didn't have fear of loans. I was like, this is an investment. I'm like, I will take out a loan because I
Mhm.
had put my parent, like, like even if you get financial aid, you still have a parent contribution. I had put that on the loan. I was like, this is an investment. I need a tutor. I need something to help me catch up. And they said, you know what? We actually provide financial aid students with tutors, but tell me what's going on. And I tell them what's going on. Right. But the thing is, I was also working. Like I had to work. I had this, I had, and like this. And then so they said, okay, I have the right person for you. So they give me the student that she was like a senior. And she sits me down and I think she's going to tutor me on all my subjects. Nope. She sits me down and she's like, we're going to do, I need you to tell me everything that's going on in your life. And we're going to sit there and do prioritization, time management, and I was like, wait, I thought we were going to do like
We needed
catch your
to
subject. And
study.
she's like, yeah, and she's like, that's not what you need. And the thing is, I was overextending myself everywhere, right? Like
Totally.
I was overextending myself at work. I was overextending myself. Like I was volunteering. I was doing this. I was looking for research opportunities. And she's like, we need to structure everything. And like even like when you calling home, like because you had those like phone cards back then. She was
Yes.
like, that's once a week. Everything is gonna be time bound, hour by
Wow.
hour, so that you have time to go to these. They had tutoring centers, learning labs, office hours. She's like, you're going to prioritize all the help you need along the way, but it's a prioritization and like and really taking care of of yourself and like like extending things, right? Like not you don't have to do it like all now.
Mhm.
And that was life changing because then she held me accountable, right? And then I started going to the office hours, the learning labs, changing my work schedule, getting different jobs that I could also study while I was working, right? Being
Nice.
more efficient and smarter, right?
Yeah.
And then that's it. Then that's it. From there, I soared, right? So she also helped me realize that it wasn't that I was and you know it's not an imposter syndrome thing. I belonged there, but that I needed to utilize the resources that were around me and be more efficient, strategic, and smarter about the things I was taking on, like that things can be combined. And that was game changer. So after that, like then I no longer felt right like an imposter. Instead I had a 4-year plan. Like, you know what, these 2 years I'm going to need that support, but the next 2 years, I'm going to be right where I need to be. And that's what happened.
Mm. That's really powerful.
Yeah. And then that was my first exposure to it. And then that's how I still have color coded calendars is what I help people with, right? Like it changed everything, how I manage the overthinking, people pleasing, and the perfectionism, right? Like not everything requires 100% effort.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's how I got through that. So then when I was like thinking about graduate school, to go back to your question about the funding,
Mhm.
I was like, you know what I want to do is I want to do my research in Nicaragua because I wanted to know, like, from that angle, go back to my
Mhm.
roots, do a little more digging on that, but from an environmental lens, because I had only gone back once and it was during Hurricane Mitch and my dad took me to volunteer. And he was always giving back too. And like, even if we didn't, he was always like, even though we were struggling, he always painted the picture, and because I didn't like, that everyone else has it, like aren't worse off, right? And that we need to
Yes.
constantly be that flow.
Yes.
And that's where I saw environmental destruction for the first time. So I was like, okay, I want
Wow.
to do something like that. And so then I said, okay, I got to apply for my own funding. So I was part of programs. I found funding for climate change that also, for diverse, they also were open to increasing their diversity. And then that's how I secured my funding. And then I started securing other funding through the university, and I learned navigated that system, right, on how to get
Mm.
money for things I wanted to test and trailblaze. And then I found people who were willing to try it out with me. And
Nice.
the thing is, that lesson served me in life, right? Because then, entering the workforce later as a diplomat, like I first spent a lot of time just laying low in the beginning, right? It's part of I mean, it works sometimes and it also works against us sometimes to keep your head
Yes.
down, lay low. That's, my dad was always like that, but I did that for a little bit and I can't do it forever. It's just not, you just can't. And so I did it for a little bit, but it was a good observation learning how does the
Yes.
system work, pay your dues. And then as I climbed the ladder there, I was like, you know what? I really I didn't like how things were being the system. So the system
Mm.
assumes that the experts are you or you learn a technical skill and then
Mhm.
that be you're an expert.
Mm.
And my thing is I'm like I don't think anyone's I don't think technical skills what gives you the expert. It's a tool. Like we
Yes.
have a unique way of solving problems, and that is our unique how. But I think our technical expertise that's always evolving and changing. And I'm like, why are we sitting here deciding what countries should do?
Yeah.
And so I start to be like, why aren't we listening to these communities, asking them their highest aspirations, what they want,
Yeah.
and we fund that. But that was seen radical and also being like, well, we don't have time for that. We got to procure money. We got to move things and all this stuff. And so once I climbed the ladder, I was like, I would like to test it. And so
How did you stop your like, how did you give yourself patience to wait? And how did you know this was the time to, like, be like, "Alright, now it's the time?"
it's hard. It's hard because I learned the hard way because,
Mm.
there's in that organization, at the time, or in most organizations, right? Latina women. It's one, they don't hold a lot of leadership roles. Second, I was pinged a lot for like, oh, help me, secretary, right? It's how
Oh,
we also present ourselves.
yes. Yes, yes,
But it's
yes.
also how I realized I had a role in that too, because I was always like, I'll help you, I'll support you, instead of coming in and saying, this is what I bring to the table. I wasn't coming in that way because at that time I was so fixated and on, it's that cultural thing. It's something like society and cultural that we're like, we start looking and comparing ourselves. And then I was like, oh, I gotta dress more professional. Oh, I gotta be more like them. And I started to lose myself.
Who you
And
were,
then when I
yeah.
would vocalize, it wasn't coming from a place of abundance and confidence. It was coming from a place of like, I see this and I want to change it. I want my voice to be heard. And it was like almost like from a scarcity validation. And so
Yes.
I think I learned the hard way that that wasn't getting me heard and it was hurting me. And so then once I like changed, once I started to focus on my inner growth and
Yes.
myself and realizing that I have a superpower of solving problems that's unique to me, that everyone else has it. And then I started just leaning into like what worked well with me. Like I talk to anyone, whether you're an admin, whether you're support staff, anything, and getting to know them and getting to value what they brought. And then
Mhm.
I started doing fitness classes for staff. When I started to lean into what was natural to me and how I connect to people, that is when things started moving for me, right? And so
Yes.
at first, I wouldn't even say like I had patience, is I just didn't understand this. So then I just followed the put your head down, just climb the ladder. That's what it's gonna be.
And it's common.
Yeah, exactly. But when I started climbing the ladder, it's nothing magical happens when you get your title. So
Right.
I'm like, wait, as I start moving titles, I'm like, why don't I feel better?
Yes.
I should have this power. But it's not true because you have to do that inner work. Like if you don't do
Yes.
that inner work, your leaders aren't made by titles.
Yes.
Doesn't matter. You're made by giving that space to people. And so
Mhm.
I had to like unlearn want making a title, metrics, all that to be able to become then that person to show up and bring people together
Mm.
behind the innovation, right? So it wasn't just I came up like I think this needs to change, but it's not like I said how this all has to change like this. No.
Yeah.
I think this needs to change. Let me talk to everybody, see what they think, pain points, whatever, and then let's bring this change together. And when I did that, that's when things soared for me in that career. Then once we changed that, we went from like a dying office from like 700,000, like an organization, 700,000 to 100 million. But more importantly, like we raised the money. More importantly, the community. It was the first time they had ever had someone that came and said, "What's your aspiration? What is it what's your vision?"
Someone who cared.
Yeah, they were so used to just chasing the money that was already being programmed and
Yeah.
that they had to. So completely changed. And then they then kept doing the work, even after the money, right? And it's like amazing, right? So for me, that was my chance to do full circle on this. Communities were able to come up with things and climate change, ecotourism, and entrepreneur do everything they wanted that was aligned with them, and
Mm.
that ties in full circle what I wanted. But then I realized then that's where my misalignment comes in. That here I was in a position of power, title. I had been married and divorced, which is another story, but then I had
Yes.
remarried the person that was aligned with me because it's a whole other story. I realized then I was just check marking.
Yes. And that's in the book.
Yeah, check marking. But my next person was the person that I decided to ask that question to. What's your vision, your alignment, your legacy? Because that's what we don't ask when we date. Like,
We
do you
don't.
have the same vision of the future that I do and the same change you want to
Mhm.
bring? Then I found the person that was wanted to share the same vision with me. And then, but then again, so I had the kids, I had the job, I had the financial stability. I was able to help my family and all these other people, even help the people who were helping my family. You know, I mean, there was just
Yeah.
so much like I could spread financial love. Okay.
Yes.
But I still had the voice in my head that this wasn't right. And I remember going home to my dad and I told him, it just doesn't feel right. And he
Mm.
goes to me, you're just never satisfied. And then he's like, you
Ah!
should just be grateful for what you have. You have a successful career, you have a loving husband, you have everything, right? And look, like you have a great life and, like all this stuff. And he's like, and you've helped thousands of people. What more do you want? And for me, it was my first time that I had a big breakdown in front of everybody. I mean, like maybe not the first time, but the first like in a long time.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is not my legacy.
Oof.
And then he was like, and I said it super loud, and everyone stayed silent. But that for me was my turning point. 'Cause I finally said it out loud. What was inside,
Yeah.
and I was like, this is not my legacy. It's great. I've been able to bring my how to here, bring impact. I now have the confidence that I saw something from start to end of a innovation and change and shift in the
Yeah.
organization and culture. But I was like, it doesn't end here for me. And this was how I made things fit into where I was. But then where is it that I do fit? And that I want to be, right? And the thing is that job brought a lot of anxiety to me because it was a very public facing job. It was a very like, as a diplomat, you're public facing, you represent someone else. And even though you're bringing innovation, you're dealing with a lot of status quo and a lot of stuff. And that was high anxiety, and high anxiety doesn't work well with a high achieving personality, right? And
Yeah.
so it's like you take on everything from everyone. And I was like, I'm like, I want to, it's just crazy. I'm like, I don't want a title. I don't want a
Mm.
title. I had to do that inner work. Titles are not my legacy.
Yeah.
And then I realized that that power is not what I want. I want influence. I want meaningful work that's leading to society and cultural change. But I don't need to be a leader of an organization. And actually, I don't want that. And I don't want that because I like bringing voices all together and I like being the one that helps
Yeah.
these teams do that. But I don't want to be the one bringing that direction in. And it's because also it limits. I felt it was limiting. So
Yeah.
that's why like the whole creating for me, creating your own limitless life is like, what is that vision? What is that legacy? And what does your dream day look like? And for me, my dream day was not communicating the organization's like mission, vision, values. It's more about I want to bring people together on shared mission value. And it also starts with the individual. And like I started noticing that everyone around me, like when I would bring this up, they're like, well, that's normal. Like that's just you just gotta like live that way. And
Wow.
you already like made your decisions. And everyone, when I was like, I'm gonna leave this position, they're like, why? Oh my God, but you have a pension, like that's crazy. And I was like, I know, but I gotta follow my calling.
Totally.
And I had this best friend but I was still like on the I'll do that in a couple years.
Mhm.
But I had this best friend with me that me and her started playing with it. Like, okay, how would it be if I built a social enterprise that like helped people discover their true purpose, their legacy? And I know how to do that. And now I've done it with communities and my team and people. Like I know what it is now. Before I used to just feel like fluff, when I would read about it. But now
Yeah.
like I know it in practice.
Yeah.
And I would talk to her, what does it look like? And oh my God. And then she was like, yeah, and excited about me. And we were like, okay, we're going to do this. I want you to do this with me. And over time, and she was my hairdresser. And I was like, I want you to be part of this with me and everything. Well, she comes to my house one day and she's like, I have headaches. The doctor tells her she needs a surgery. And I'm like, okay, have your daughter come to my house, stay with me. So she did. And then we get a call and her daughter's like, I gotta go. And I'm like, where are you going? And I'm like, she's under my roof. I'm like, where are you going? You have to stay
Right.
here. And she's like, no, something's wrong with mom. And I'm like, okay, go. And then she didn't make it.
Oh my
And she was close to my age. Yeah.
gosh.
And she was close to my age.
So fast.
So fast. And like we were not expecting it. She had an aneurysm.
Oh.
And I started to realize I cannot like, why am I waiting a couple years?
Yes.
And at her funeral, I realized that people didn't know all the ideas that she had, all the things that we were working on, the vision. They
Mm.
celebrated her life, but a lot of the impact was missing, and she still had so many more ideas to live. And so I said, I need to transform this pain and take action. And so I took action and left. And so I left all of it and said, I told, my husband and the kids, I'm like, okay, we're leaving all of it and we're going to downsize and we're going to invest in ourselves and invest in this dream. And
I see.
yeah, and then that's it. So we got a place, a little condo, gave up our huge 6-bedroom house, and we downsized and we went to a small thing and invest. And I said, I'm going to invest in myself and I'm going to learn. I imagine I had no idea on social media because I wasn't allowed to really have one.
Right.
I was starting from zero and I could not use anything from that past life. I can talk about it now because the years have passed. But in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, I could not talk about anything I did in my diplomatic service because there's a period of time you can't talk, you can't use
Oh my
anything for
gosh.
gain, right? All that stuff, right? And the thing is, even though they're not really tied, you have to be. So I was starting from zero. So I was like, okay, I got to bring this approach and just bring it out there. But I mean, I had always been coaching and mentoring people outside of work, and so I just said leaning on to already the volunteer things I was doing and like just transitioning people. Hey, this is what I'm doing now, and so I'm going to lean in towards at first coaching because that's what I do a lot,
Yeah.
like informally.
Yeah.
And then I started to do a lot of that pro bono. Like I was like, look, like if you get a transformation, tell me. And then from there, let's build it. And then that's how I built it. And then I pitched my book. And then I was like, look, I know.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah,
Because
I know.
we're
So
we're
that's what
getting to
happens.
to the present. But let's let's take a very, very quick coffee break.
Sabrosura pa' ti que.
Dr. Esther, do you drink coffee?
Yes,
Nicaraguan coffee is so good.
it is. I'm not a coffee drinker. I drink decaf
Okay.
because coffee makes me jittery.
Jittery? Okay.
But I am obsessed with, have you tried Salud? Taste Salud. It's a Latino brand. They make
No.
they're amazing. It's called Taste Salud. I love them. They make they're like 10-calorie drinks. Like think about like Crystal Light without chemicals.
Okay.
No chemicals. It's completely natural and it's full of immunity. And it has all the flavors that we love, like maracuya or chinola, as they say in the DR. They got pitaya. They have mango con
What?
chile. Like, and it's full of vitamins and I'm obsessed. And then they also have like calming one, a calming one which you could go to sleep and it's like ponche flavor. They also have energy and focus. Anyways, I'm obsessed with that. So we could I'll take my salud break.
Yeah. Is it Taste Salud? Aguas frescas with a boost?
Yes, taste salud. Yeah.
I did not know. You're introducing me to a whole new rabbit hole that I'm about to embark. Only
Yeah.
1 gram of
I
sugar.
love it. Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't have that fake sugar in it either. Yeah.
So they have energy and focus, calm and sleep, hydration, immunity. Okay. Okay. Website is
They're
open.
amazing.
Let's
But
get back to.
anyways, I don't get anything from it. I just love them.
I don't either, but we just gave them a big shout out. So
Yeah.
maybe they'll sponsor an episode. We'll see.
Yeah.
So, what's your beverage, morning beverage? Is it that? Is it that?
Yeah. I drink that energy focus mixed with the immunity, like half and half. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I love it. I end up drinking like 3 of them a day, like 3 like Stanleys of them a day.
Yay. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I am drinking a latte. So I made myself a turmeric latte.
Ooh, cool.
Yeah. So I added turmeric and I'm attempting to do the carnivore diet because I'm dealing with fibroids. And my partner's like, I read
Oh, yeah.
that it helps with that. And I'm like, I don't know, but it's so hard. I feel like you
It
probably
is.
resonate with this. Like we grew up with so many veggies and like very rich
Yes.
meals that just eating animal products is like this is so boring.
Yeah.
And so Yeah. So I used to add honey to my turmeric latte, but now
Oh, that's
it's
cool.
plain. So that's what I'm drinking, turmeric latte. And
Nice.
I broke my coffee maker this morning, but I fixed it. So that's
Oh
why I know.
no.
But we're back to normal. And I want to give a shout out to Surge Coffee in San Diego. They are in El Cajon. Shout out to Valerie. She came to my anniversary event this past Sunday, and well, this episode is going to release later, but whatever. She came to my anniversary event. She sponsored the coffee for the event, and it's great.
Oh
It's a
wow.
small coffee shop in San Diego, and what's cool is that their space is shared with an art gallery. And so every month there's new art. It's so cool, right?
Oh, that is so cool. Well, next time in San Diego, I'm gonna check them out. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
And let me know. I'm here. Okay, let's get back to the show. Okay, Dr. Esther. So you decide to leave everything and you're like, I'm going to invest in myself. How would you discern what that investment looks like?
Yeah. Well, I had that vision, right? So that's why I do a lot of visioning exercise of like, what did I want my 5 year day to look like? And it's less important. And I tell people like I had to do it for myself too. It's not
Mhm.
about the money. It's about what's the impact and feeling you want to have. And for me was a much bigger reach. I wanted to have the freedom of selecting that reach, right? I mean, that was the thing that was my word of the year was freedom because even though I had impact in the organization, I didn't have freedom to choose,
Mhm.
right? Like I had to work with boundaries and I didn't
Yeah.
like the boundary that they had placed on me.
Yeah.
I wanted to have the freedom to I felt like I'm like, look, I already had a rich career, all that stuff. Now it's about I'm giving myself permission to go after my limitless life, regardless of if people approve or not. I don't need validation anymore. So part of it was the investing yourself was I had gone through healing of
Mhm.
like, I don't need to validate. I did all the right things, all the shoulds. I'm
Yep.
not going to do any of that anymore. I'm going to go
Mm.
after what's my dream day. And also, I worked on it with my spouse, with my partner. I was like, what is your dream day? What are we building together? And he's like, well, this is your time because he had left a couple years before, and I helped him grow his. Because also, so I also had that to realize that there's you could go on your own and everybody's narratives of like it won't work. I was like, no, it does. You can make it work.
Yes.
So I had that, but I was like, what is my dream day? And my dream day is really what I have today. It was like I can work from anywhere, geographic freedom, time freedom, that I get to choose the projects I want, but at the same time, like impact people in ways I had never dreamed about, right? So I wanted to feel like in 5 years, I'm impacting in the ways that it's aligned with me beyond. I'm giving people like full transformations, whether it's like at work, in their personal life, in their family, in their communities, right? And that I'm bringing it like that. I'm not playing small,
Yes.
and that I'm impacting and helping like in the most expansive way that I can, right? And so that was my dream day that and the flexibility was key that I could wake up, I could exercise if I wanted in the morning or I could do it at night, that I could be in a t-shirt and
Yeah.
I didn't have to confine to anything like how I look, what I wear, how I am. I didn't have to like code switch all day. You know what I mean? Like there was just a lot of layers.
Yes.
So at first, then investing in myself is like, okay, what is that? How do I start? And I had to remind myself that even with that other thing I told you where it grew to 100 million, it's not in 1 year, right? These are like 3 to 5 year things. And everything,
Mhm.
even in college, it's not a 1 year thing. Even in graduate school, it's a 6 year thing, right? So I reminded myself that like we always overestimate we could do in a year,
Yeah.
underestimate we can do in 5. And I have seen that so many times in my life. So I just kept the vision true to me. So I was like, okay, between me and my vision, what's the gap?
Mm.
Who do I need to know? What do I need to learn? And what do I need to do?
Yes.
And so that's how I started. I'm like, okay, with those 3 things. And every day I had 3 of those things. Who, learn that. And the who's important because culturally, I was always taught to mistrust, don't trust your neighbor, don't trust
Mhm.
people around you. Oh, self-made, and I don't believe in that word.
I
Like
agree.
I all the impact I've had has been in this collective power. And I was yes, and I've been burned by people, but it doesn't mean I'm going to stop being who I am. And but I've also been amazingly blessed and rewarded by people. And really for me, that's just a matter of filtering, that
Yes.
you just know, like, you have to just spend more time filtering. So I create those protections where I'm like, okay, fine, I don't want to get, I am overgiving. So how do I create filters, and you learn it, of the people I want to coach and impact, and if there's that alignment. And then I don't have to say yes to everything. I don't have to help everyone.
That's
And then
right.
what I liked about the starting with coaching is that I'm like, unlike my past where I felt that I had to fix everything and help people that didn't want to be helped, this time, like, if you want, if this resonates with you, I'm
Mm-hmm.
here, but I'm not forcing it. You can come, and also being open. Because in the beginning, I had a lot of naysayers, right? They're like, you're crazy. You're going to go back to your job. This is nuts. This is completely different. And I was like, actually, it's all the same, because the reason why environmental problems cannot be solved is because people don't know who they are. And if they don't know who they are, they're not open to listening to other people. So if you're not open to listening to other people, how are we going to come together and solve problems?
Mm.
And I remember the resistance I faced in that org when I would ask people, like, why are you so hesitant to listening to these communities? People would tell me, well, I've never been listened to. I don't even know how to do that. And that's why I was like, okay, then I have to work with the person, because when you understand, it's the same process I went through. And you understand what you bring to the table. You understand that everyone, regardless of their walk in life, brings something to the table. And it goes both ways. Like, I have this cool fact of, what's the question that both CEOs and fishermen never get asked?
What is the question?
So it's, what's your highest aspiration?
Mm.
Why neither of them get asked is because it's assumed the CEO's already met it, and it's assumed the fisherman doesn't have one.
Doesn't have one. Correct.
And that's why for me it's not, it's across all boards, you know what I mean? That's why, like, for me it's like helping people of all walks of life, because I have been in a position of power. Everyone assumed I had everything, and no one asked me
Yeah.
what I wanted to be sought off for, what's my vision for the future. And I've also been the person, not the fisherman, but like, struggling,
Yeah.
right, broke,
Yeah.
and working at Superguy, where people just assume, like, oh, she's just the Latina that just wants to get married. And there's nothing wrong with folks that want to get married if that's your vision and aspiration. It
Totally.
just was not mine, right? It wasn't like, that wasn't my center. Like, we
Mm.
assume what people's centers are by,
Mm-hmm.
or like visions, by what we see. And so for me, it's like, you got to ask that question to everyone. So that's like, for me, that's what drew me. That I was like, that's the cultural shift I want to change. and and that we need to ask that regardless of all around, because you don't know, people suffer in silence, and especially like the high achieving individual. And high achieving doesn't
The
necessarily,
strong people.
yeah, it doesn't mean titles. Like that fisherman that I
Yeah.
worked with in that community, he is a high achieving individual, and that then created his dive shop, and he's created this whole ecotourism center, right? It's not about, high achiever does not mean the person who has necessarily the financial success or a title. It's someone who, is looking like for that, constant movingly forward, right? And that can be from any walk. I also coach refugees, and they have that spirit
Mm.
too, right? They're trying to build innovation and entrepreneurship in their communities, right? But it's everywhere, right? It's on the top and
Yeah.
the bottom and lateral. That's why we got to bring all these voices together. That was the motivation under my book, that you can create your limitless life, and it's for anyone, for any walk of life, any age, right? And it's really for these people that have climbed some sort of social economic ladder. It doesn't matter if it's small or big, but have done some climbing in their lives wherever they are, and now have a fear of continuing that, because you're scared of losing it all. You're scared of taking that next leap.
Or because you're tired.
Yeah, and you also feel like you shouldn't, right? You're like, "Oh, I should be grateful." And I'm like, "No. If
Mm-hmm.
let that go. Let that
Right.
go. If it's
Right.
not your vision, if it's not your legacy, keep going." Like, there's no metric. And so yeah, so that's why I have chasing the American dream crossed out, because I'm
I
like, that's so
know.
limiting. That's so metric oriented, and not everyone has the same metrics, same
Mm-hmm.
timeline, and there's no rush. Like, what,
Mm-hmm.
it's, everyone has a different superpower. So it may take you 10 years to build out your creating limits. It might take someone else 2. but it's also about the healing and your own stories, and it doesn't matter when you get there, it matters that you get there
that you
and
get
that you
there.
create that feeling and impact you want. And we need to move away from, yeah, like all those defined things. And I do that with my kids. Like, sure, I see strengths in them, I have temptation to push them,
Mm.
and I stop. I'm like, I do the same exercises. What's your legacy? What's your dream? How do you see things? What kind of change? So I support them, like using the same principles, support them on what they want to build and their vision, not what I want for them, right?
So the book,
Yeah.
creating your limitless life, and you have chasing the American dream crossed off, which I love that.
Yeah.
And there's also the workbook, which is great because
Yep.
within the book, so the book is like, I feel like it's part memoir, part like,
Yep.
then you go in personal development, which is really fun. And then the workbook, some of the exercises in the book, the workbook has them, but you can actually like there's space in the book, but in the workbook you can treat it as a notebook.
Yep.
And I love the invitation to kind of like not just set it and forget it, or not just do it once, and like the workbook truly is a work in progress, a kind of like revisit it once a quarter type thing.
Yep.
Tell us where we can find it.
Yeah, you can find it at any retailer, any book retailer, right? Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anything. So it's online, and even if like so access, and we talked about justice access before.
Yes, yes.
For me, it's really important. I have the digital version, super affordable for students or people, that's like, a physical book could be really expensive. I remember when I was in high school, I couldn't buy physical books. I went to the library, so the book's also in the library system. So there's even
Yes.
like if you have the app of the library, I can't remember the name of it right now, but I think it's
Libby?
Hoopla.
Oh, that's another one.
I think that's the one. Hoopla. You can go in Hoopla and it's there. So if you have a library card, you can check it out for
Nice.
free, both of them. Yeah. So access is not an issue, right? And then but if you want the physical, you order the physical. And what's nice is that the workbooks actually was a bigger hit than the book at first, because it's, for people who don't necessarily have
To
time
read?
to sit down and go through a whole book,
Yeah,
it functions on its own. It asks you those hard
it
questions
really
like,
does.
write your obituary. Like, what is the gap? Because you realize then the obituary sets your mind that it's not about the title, your money,
Mhm,
what you owned in assets. It's like, what feeling and impact did you have and want to have?
mhm.
And what you want, and then rewrite it. What do you want to have? And then it asks you other questions too, like childhood dream, but not so much about the dream. Like, what were the characteristics of it? What did you overcome and how? Because that's what you got to integrate to your everyday. It's not just in crisis.
Right.
And then I had like the whole road mapping of like your 5 years, your visioning, and then your time. Remember, I was telling you about like that one coach taught me the
Yes.
time thing. Like, I've adapted it now to be like, you're going to limit your people pleasing. You're going to limit how much
Mhm.
time you spend on doing tasks. You're not gonna. You're. How do you do set boundaries? Boundaries, something I struggled with a lot,
Yep.
because I always want to help and say yes, but there's a way of, it doesn't have to be a no, but it's not a yes now. Like, I can be like, look, I'm happy to help you, but I got all this. I can help you a month from now.
Totally.
I can help you 2 months from now. So if you still want that, I'm here. But if for right now, or connect to someone else, because we're
Yep.
always scared to be unkind, but it's more unkind to do something you don't want to do. And so it's really like changing the narrative around the no and the boundaries and how
Mm.
to do that, and then celebrating. I think I have a whole step on like, we don't enjoy with the book. That was a big, the investing myself was celebrating the book throughout the whole process. So
Yes.
instead of like my PhD or my title, where I celebrate till the end, I'm like, no, we're gonna celebrate every single step. So like with my husband, we celebrated like choosing the font, choosing the paper, you know,
Yes.
a title for a section, and that was huge because I still remember those days. And it didn't, when it was done, it didn't feel like a check mark. It was a beautiful journey.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I like that. So I have a whole celebration calendar, vision board. So everything's in the workbook. So it's nice.
It's really I started actually with a workbook.
Oh, nice. Yeah, you could do it with your family, you could do it with your team.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. And it's fun. Like it's colorful, and one thing that I like I want to show you. I color code my calendars.
Oh
And
yeah,
I
I love
laughed
that. Me
when I
too.
read this.
I mean, clearly, it's there.
And I'm like, oh
Nice.
my gosh, I'm not the weird person that color codes her calendar. And one of my friends, also a coach, her business is called, shout out to Charisse, her business is called Everyday Yellow because she also color codes her calendar. And her thing is yellow is fun. And so everyday yellow means you want to have yellow every day in your calendar, which I'm working
That's
on
nice.
it.
That's cool.
I don't know if I'm there yet. But like I switched. I used to have fun and fun in life was in yellow, and then when she told me about her, I'm like, okay, I'll in your honor, I'll switch my fun to yellow.
Nice.
And now I look at it and I'm like, oh, there's not enough yellow, but we'll get
Yeah,
there.
I love the color coding because it helps you realize, like,
Where are you spending your time?
yeah, where are you spending your time, and is there a mix? And
Mm-hmm.
what things don't, what, if it doesn't happen today, not the end of the world, and you move it the next day. And
Yeah.
it takes everything from your head to
Mm-hmm.
paper. So I tell everybody, like, some people ask me, I don't see you anxious anymore. I don't see anything. Because I'm like, because it doesn't live in my head anymore. It lives on the calendar. Like,
Yes.
I already know it's all there. So I
Yes.
just like know the night before, I'm like, what does my next day look like? But it's not me spinning anymore in my head because I already know it's there. It's already written somewhere.
Yes.
So moving it from here to there
It's a
is
big
huge
deal.
because it's not my burden anymore. It's the calendar's burden. It's gone
Mm-hmm.
from me. And then as I remember things, you can add it on to other weeks.
Totally.
But there's something super powerful in that because then it gives you more space.
100%.
And I remember you asked me, I think earlier, um, anyways, about, like, yeah, investment. So it's also like that was this whole journey. Yeah, like the book, the coaching, the speaking, the youth, everything. Yeah.
Choosing to take action it could also be an investment.
Yep.
It's a choice.
Absolutely.
And so, Dr. Esther, tell us all the places and spaces where we can find you. We could stay talking for hours. But listeners, I'm sure they've arrived to work or they're finished their cleaning.
I'm in Instagram, be act change. So, like, be yourself, take action, and we can all change the world together.
Yay.
And then I'm on LinkedIn, just Esther Zeledon. And I'm pitching my second book. Like, my so stay tuned, in a maybe in a year or two it'll be out. I don't know, we'll see. But
Yay.
the next book is taking this to the next step, like, awakening a trailblazer within, and more on, great, once you know your limitless life, you've taken action, all that. When you want to move, right? Let's say you've moved towards the legacy. When now it's moving towards making sure all your actions are aligned, it's really stepping into that spiritual side, your intuition, your higher
Mm.
self, and in our community,
Es brujería.
yeah, it's brujeria, and even like breath work. I host breath work workshops in Santo
I
Domingo.
love that.
And at first it was really hard to get people.
¿Por qué no creían?
No, because they're like, what is that?
Sí,
I
es
don't know if I
brujería.
believe in that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But then
Mm-hmm.
they start to go, and it's so powerful, right? We
Mm-hmm.
have these things inside of us. And so I'm really wanting to be like, that's my next thing. Like, that's my vision of, like, taking on, like, the Celestine prophecy visions, prophecy like that said that world had moved there in the 80s and 90s, but I think, like, our community is still stuck there.
Yes.
And so I really want to
Yes.
move the BIPOC community into this, because the more we can tap, well, the more aligned you are, the more you create your
Yes.
limitless life, the more synchronicities happen to you. The more synchronicities happen to you, the easier it is to connect to your higher self in the spiritual world, the more impact you make, right? It starts becoming like this super
Mm-hmm.
linear curve, right?
Because you're
But
fully
that's the
connected.
second book. So the first book, exactly. So the first book is like getting out of the, like,
Day to
our
day.
shoulds and day to
Yeah.
day, into the vision we want to create, do it. And then from now, let's take it to the next step, right? And to allow that flow, because it does happen. I remember, for a long time, the synchronicity stopped happening for me. And once I started this journey,
Yeah.
that's why, I mean, investment for me so many ways. Like, it was a financial, but it was also like a personal, allowing me to that freedom to connect.
Yeah.
Then what starts happening to me, more the synchronicities came back, right? And the power, that's a different type of power.
I love that.
For me, that's the power. That's the power I wanted, to be connected to myself and to other people in such a deep way. That's transformative. So yeah, so you can find me Instagram, LinkedIn. I do talks. I do a lot of events. I'm always open to doing free events for youth. I do that a lot at universities, at libraries, and then of course I do paid events for corporates and teams and things. And I do fun workshops. I host retreats. So, anyways, yeah,
How fun. We should do something together. Sounds super fun.
yeah, definitely.
I know. I haven't visited DR, and that's on my places to go.
You
I fell in love
should.
with Puerto Rico. When I went to Puerto Rico for the first time, I was like I'm very Mexican, but Puerto Rico really felt more like home, which is kind of like weird. And so I'm very curious about DR, especially because
Yeah.
I love Dominican bachata. It's a fun fact that people didn't
Oh yeah.
ask for.
No, the music's great,
That's
and
the real bachata.
I love the Caribbean. I mean, I'm Nicaraguense. I love Nicaragua and the food and everything. But I have a special place. I lived in
There's
Jamaica for a couple
something
years too.
about the
It's
Caribbean.
Caribbean. I know. I love it. And if you want, I could take you to that community I was telling you about, like, so you can actually see what I was talking about in real time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's
and it's
let's
beautiful. It looks like Cabo there. It's like this hidden gem,
mm, how fun.
and they have this coral mangroves release this mineral into the water, and actually it's really good for you, but it's also like a nice little, like, almost like a spiritual vortex, if you could think about it, because you're
I
like
could see that
connected in a
100%.
way. Yeah,
And
it's
as a
really cool,
Scorpio
and so it's
sun,
good for your
water
I'm
is
also
like
a Scorpio.
when's your birthday?
When's your birthday? I'm October 24th.
Oh, you're a Libra Scorpio. I'm a Scorpio. I'm a November Scorpio. I'm a November 5th.
Okay,
So
cool.
your birthday's
Yeah.
coming up. Happy early birthday.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a Scorpio sun Sag rising.
Okay, cool.
So lots of people think I'm Sagittarius, and I'm like, oh no, wait till you work with me. We're gonna go in the shadows very deep. Let's go. So, but I wanted to say I did resonate a lot with the what you mentioned around our community still kind of like being stuck in the 80s, 90s. I recently at my anniversary event, I do inner child work. Like I work a lot with the subconscious mind and really connecting to the stories,
Mhm.
the inner stories that we tell ourselves that kind of like come to the surface without us asking. They just come to the surface because they're familiar, because the limbic brain always wins. And so I didn't tell
Yeah.
people what we were gonna do. I just said, come celebrate my birthday. And whoever needed to be there,
I do that too.
that's very
I do
Scorpio
that too.
thing.
You have to do that.
Yes, it's a very Scorpio thing. I've realized. I'm embracing it now because people are like, "Pam, I don't know what I'm gonna get into when I come to your things because there's
Exactly.
always something."
But then they love it.
Yeah, and I'm like, "Listen, just trust it. Trust the process." So,
Exactly. That's exactly what I say. I would just go with it.
it's gonna be fine. Like, I'm not gonna hurt you. And so, I didn't tell people that we were gonna do anything like inner child work or anything. And, like, afterwards, like, somebody was like, "What kind of brujeria is that?" And I'm like, "Ooh, but it's a good brujeria, like, because now you're so much more connected, right?" And so,
Exactly.
100%, I think we need to start doing, like, kinda like, just come have fun. It's a fiesta. They'll
Yes.
show up, and then we do the deep work.
Exactly. And it's so needed. Like, like even like the constelaciones work too. And then
Claro.
and hypnotherapy. I mean, that's what I'm kind of writing in this second book. It's like there's all these things that I think everyone just thinks of. Imagine, still in our community, therapy and coaching is taboo.
Yep.
But they don't even realize that within therapy and coaching, there's this whole realm
Yep.
that's amazing. And when you actually go try all the different ones, like breathwork, Reiki,
Mhm.
hypnotherapy, inner child work,
Yep.
tapping, like there's so much, and it's actually helps you heal and transform in ways and get to know yourself and what stories you want to keep and what stories are not yours to have and
Yes,
that you want
yes,
to
yes.
release, right? But I love the inner child. Like that's what I was telling you about my sister when we started the conversation, right? Like
Yes, that's why I
with my
always,
sister,
like,
me, you learn
start back there
you learn so much about
so
your
much.
role, how you the narratives you were told that you carried, and then what you need to let go.
Yes.
And that, yeah, 100%. I love that you're doing the work. Yeah, we should totally do something together. I love that stuff. And that's what I did
Yeah.
too. In my retreat, I did a whole connect to your higher self, but how I named it was like, we're gonna tap into our intuition. And then I took them on a whole like
It's the best. And then people come out and they're like,
amazing
yes.
Lionsgate manifestation whole thing.
Nice.
But it was
Nice.
amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
Totally. And I mean, another thing that I tell people is like, if you really want to talk about brujeria, like prayers are spells.
True.
Like,
Fact.
so we've been doing brujeria even before, like forever, actually. But I want to know, we're so out of time. I don't want to take up more of your time. I already asked for 15 additional minutes. So,
You're
Dr. Esther, thank you so much for all your work, for coming to Café con Pam. You told us already where we can find you. We'll be in touch. Gracias.
Thank you so much.
All right, listeners, ¿qué tal? I hope you're inspired. I hope you're ready to live your limitless life. We're going to have all the things linked in the show notes so you can find Dr. Esther, so you can get the book, get the workbook. I think the workbook is amazing. The book is also great. But I like me some like tactile things. Anytime I come across a book that comes with a workbook, I eat that up because to me, it's very actionable. And so I think you'll enjoy it. Bueno, if this is your first time here, welcome to Café con Pam. I hope you stay. I hope you subscribe, follow, hit the bell, do all the things depending on where you are listening and tuning in from now. A quick update. You may have noticed that, this is going to be an update that transcends time. So if you're listening to this episode as it's being released, at least plus minus a week, we've recently switched hosts because we are starting to monetize Café con Pam. We've been doing this for 8 years, fully self-funded, and now we are opening up the space, growing, expanding, evolving. And we are bringing in advertisers. And so you may have noticed that there's probably more ads than you're used to. I thank you. I want to thank you ahead of time for staying here. And we are working on a low cost monthly support to have you listen to the episodes ad free. This is in the works. Again, if you're listening to this 10 years from now, this doesn't apply to you. This is more so for those of you listening to the episode within the time frame of the release. Another update is you've asked for a lot more solo episodes. I'm working on those. Those of you who join that monthly support, which is going to be very likely, I did a survey and it's going to be very likely $5. And so those of you who join that, you'll also get access to additional episodes that I'll record myself by myself for you. And so you get more than just the ad-free Café con Pam. Bueno, I have to catch a flight. I'm recording this literally as my bags are packed. I have my no mono. Why are you blinking? I have my bags ready to go. Literally, I push stop and then I'm leaving. So I have to go. But thank you so much for being here. Make sure we stay connected, not only just by subscribing and following all the things, but also on socials. We kind of hang out on the socials at Cafe Compound Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Listeners, thank you so, so much for being here today. If you want to learn more about all the things that we do, cafecompam.com. That's the place. That's our house. That's where you can find out about all of the things. Y bueno, como siempre, stay shining. Sabrosura pa' ti que